Welcome to Forgotten History Daily. I am William, and tonight we journey into one of history's most fascinating and darkest stories. On a chilly winter morning in Boston, on January 15, 1919, disaster struck the city in the form of a calamitous event that still sends shivers down the spines of historians and residents alike. What might have seemed like an inconsequential industrial accident would, in reality, prove to be one of the most tragic incidents in American history. A catastrophe so shocking that it's astonishing its details are largely unknown. Imagine, if you will, a 25-foot-high wave of molasses, as thick as syrup and as sweet-smelling as sugar, sweeping through the city streets like a juggernaut. In mere minutes, this lethal liquid would engulf an entire neighborhood, destroying homes, businesses, and lives in its wake. The Great Molasses Flood, as it came to be known, would claim the lives of 21 people, injuring over 150 others, and leaving a trail of devastation that would take years to recover from. At first light on that fateful morning, the Purity Distilling Company's storage tank burst open, releasing the molasses into the streets of North End. Panic set in as residents struggled to comprehend the scale of the disaster unfolding before their eyes. The molasses wave was so immense that it even engulfed the city's harbour, creating a tidal-like surge that would continue for hours. This calamity might have been overlooked by history, not for the sheer force and suddenness with which it struck. As historian David Henking notes, the Great Molasses Flood was one of those rare events in which disaster strikes so swiftly that there's little time to react. And yet, despite its significance, this event tonight on Forgotten History Daily will delve into the causes behind this tragedy and explore how it reflects a darker side of America, an era of industrialization where profits often took precedence. As the sun rose over Boston's North End, residents began to emerge from their homes, unaware of the disaster that had unfolded overnight. The streets were eerily quiet, except for the sound of groaning and wailing from those who had escaped the molasses wave by mere seconds. Emergency services struggled to respond to the crisis, with firefighters and police officers battling against the sheer volume of molasses, which had turned the streets into a sticky, sweet-smelling quagmire. One of the responders on the scene was Boston's fire commissioner, Edward J. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. He would later recall in an interview with the Boston Globe. The molasses had seeped into every nook and cranny, filling homes, businesses, and even the cellars of nearby buildings. It was as if the very fabric of the neighborhood had been torn apart. As the rescue efforts continued, it became clear that the destruction caused by the molasses was not limited to the physical landscape. The community itself had been shattered. Families who had lived in the affected area for generations were forced to flee their homes, never to return. Businesses that had been pillars of the local economy for decades were reduced to rubble, leaving countless workers without employment. The economic impact of the disaster was also significant. The Purity Distilling Company's tank was one of several similar storage facilities in the city, and fears arose that more such disasters could be imminent. As a result, insurance companies began to re-evaluate their policies for industrial accidents, leading to a sharp increase in premiums for businesses operating in Boston. The investigation into the cause of the disaster was led by the Massachusetts State Coroner's Office, which determined that the rupturing of the tank had been caused by an excessive buildup of pressure. The coroner's report also noted that the company's management had been aware of potential structural weaknesses in the tank for months prior to the disaster, but had failed to take corrective action. The tragedy sparked widespread outrage and demands for greater accountability from industry leaders. "This is not just a disaster, it's a travesty," declared Mayor Andrew Peters in an address to the City Council. "We must ensure that such a calamity never happens again." As the North End struggled to rebuild and heal, a strange phenomenon began to emerge. Survivors of the disaster reported experiencing vivid nightmares, flashbacks, and even what they described as molasses phobias. The trauma caused by the event would take years to come to terms with, leaving deep emotion. In 1921, 2 years after the Great Molasses Flood, the Purity Distilling Company went out of business. The site where the tank stood was eventually converted into a memorial park, bearing the names of the 21 victims who lost their lives that fateful day. Today, on the anniversary of the disaster, residents and visitors alike gather to pay respects to those whose lives were forever changed by this horrific event. The Great Molasses Flood remains an important reminder of the human cost of industrialization and the importance of prioritizing safety over profits. It serves as a warning that even in the most seemingly innocuous of times, tragedy can strike without warning, leaving behind only chaos and devastation in its wake. The year was 1919, a time of great change and upheaval in America's industrial landscape. Boston's North End, once a vibrant and thriving neighborhood, was now home to the Purity Distilling Company, a behemoth of industry that churned out molasses by the barrelload. The city itself was a hub of commercial activity, with the harbour bustling with cargo ships and sailors coming and going at all hours. Imagine strolling through these narrow streets on a crisp winter morning in February 1919. The air is alive with the smell of salt water, roasting coffee from the local cafes, and the distant tang of molasses wafting from the Purity Distilling Company's massive storage tank looming large over the rooftops. As you walk, notice the horse-drawn carriages rattling along commercial streets, their drivers expertly navigating the crowded thoroughfares. Look up at the windows of the tenements, where families are stirring to start another day. Many of these residents worked for the distillery or its suppliers. Others ran small shops and restaurants catering to the neighborhood's diverse population. It's not hard to imagine why this area was known as the Little Italy of Boston. Italian immigrants had poured into the city in the late 19th century, seeking work and start in America. They brought with them their traditions, customs, and love of good food, which explains the proliferation of pasta makers, bakers, and butchers throughout the neighborhood. But amidst all this activity and growth, there existed a darker underbelly to life in Boston's North End. The Purity Distilling Company was one of many industrial behemoths that tumultuated the cityscape, churning out vast quantities of molasses, whiskey, and other spirits. These factories operated around the clock, with workers toiling long hours for low wages, exposed to hazardous conditions, and sometimes even enslaved by their employers. As you continue your stroll through the North End, take note of the row houses that line the streets. These tenements, often cramped and poorly ventilated, housed entire families in a handful of rooms. Imagine living with your extended family, sharing a small kitchen and cramped bathroom facilities. This was the reality for many Boston's working class, an invisible army of factory workers, dock workers, and laborers who kept America running. And yet, despite these hardships, there existed a strong sense of community in the North End. Residents looked out for one another, with neighbors often sharing what little they had to make ends meet. The local churches played a vital role, providing food, shelter, and support services to those in need. The sounds and smells of this vibrant neighborhood would be forever etched into the memories of its residents. Like the sizzling aroma of freshly cooked pasta wafting from Sal's Italian restaurant on Street, or the chugging rumble of trolleys rattling over the cobblestones as they made their way to the nearest subway station. This was the Boston that existed before the Great Molasses Flood of 1919. It was a city teeming with life, energy, and contradictions, where poverty and opulence lived side by side, where progress and tradition battled for dominance. But on January 15th, 1919, everything changed. As we return to the site of the disaster, we see that time has not stood still. The streets have been paved over, new buildings erected in place of those destroyed by the molasses wave, but the memories linger. Means is a testament to the resilience and strength of the community that once thrived here, and a reminder that even today, as America looks out upon its industrial landscape, questions about accountability. In 1920, President Woodrow Wilson signed into law the Adamson Act, which established an 8-hour workday for interstate railroad workers. This was just one of many attempts by government officials to improve working conditions in America's factories and industries. But much more would be needed to address the gross injustices perpetrated by companies like Purity Distilling. As the North End slowly rebuilds itself, you can almost hear whispers of discontent rising up from its residents. The whispers of discontent were fueled by the investigation into the disaster, which revealed a shocking lack of concern for public safety on the part of Purity Distilling and its owner, John S. The company's records showed that they had been warned about the potential dangers of storing molasses in an unlined steel tank, but they chose to ignore these warnings and proceed with their plans. In fact, it was later discovered that the tank had been constructed by a firm that specialized in building tanks for holding beer, not highly corrosive liquids like molasses. As the North End residents struggled to come to terms with what had happened, they began to demand answers from Purity Distilling and the city government. The Boston Evening Globe ran scathing editorials condemning the company's negligence and calling for greater oversight of industry practices in the city. The Boston Herald also weighed in, publishing a series of exposés that highlighted the lax regulations governing the storage of hazardous materials. The pressure on Cortland and Purity Distilling eventually led to a significant change in their behavior. They began to take steps to improve safety at their plant, including the installation of new warning signs and emergency procedures. However, many believed that these efforts came too little, too late. The company's reputation had been irreparably damaged, and they would never be able to fully restore it. The Great Molasses Flood also led to a greater awareness of the dangers posed by industrial activities in urban areas. As cities across America continued to grow and expand, there was a growing recognition that the risks associated with industrial development needed to be better managed. This led to increased calls for stricter regulations on industry practices, including greater oversight of storage fees and more robust emergency preparedness plans. As we walk through the North End today, it's possible to see remnants of the disaster still lingering in the architecture and the stories of its residents. The old Boston Garden building stands as a testament to the neighborhood's resilience, while the cobblestone streets seem to hold secrets of their own. We spoke with several longtime residents who shared their memories of that fateful day, including 95-year-old Marie Del Vecchio, who still lives in the area and remembers hearing the roar of the molasses wave. It was like a giant tidal wave coming through our street, she recalled, shaking her head. People were screaming, running for their lives. I'll never forget it as long as I live. Del Vecchio's words are a poignant reminder that even decades after the disaster, its impact still resonates with those who lived through it. As we continue to explore this once thriving neighborhood, one thing becomes clear. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919 was not just a tragic accident, it was also a turning point in the city's history, marking the beginning of a new. We find ourselves at the site of the original tank, now replaced by a modern parking garage. As we pause to reflect on what transpired here, a sense of unease settled over us. We think about the stories that remain the lives lost, the families torn apart, and begin to piece together the larger narrative that this disaster represents. It is a story about corporate negligence, government failure, and community resilience in the face of tragedy. A story about how one fateful day forever altered the fabric of Boston's North End, leaving behind a legacy of hope and determination. The city of Boston, 1915. A bustling metropolis, driven by industry and innovation. The North End, a working-class neighborhood, home to generations of Italian-American immigrants. Little did they know, their lives were about to be forever changed by the insatiable hunger for profit and progress. On January 1st, 1915, a new year dawned on Boston, bringing with it the promise of growth and prosperity. Purity Distilling Company, one of the city's largest industrial players, had just completed a massive expansion project at its North End facility. The company, founded by Michael Coughlin in 1888, specialized in producing high-quality molasses for food and industrial purposes. As we walk through the narrow streets of the North End today, it's hard to imagine the sheer scale of this industrial behemoth. The Purity Distilling Plant was a massive complex, sprawling over several city blocks, with towering storage tanks and humming machinery. But behind its gleaming facades lay a web of secrets and deceit. Michael Coughlin, the company's founder, was a shrewd businessman, driven by his vision for profit and growth. Born in England, he immigrated to America in 1870, settling in Boston with nothing but determination in his heart. Through hard work and strategic business deals, Coughlin amassed a small fortune, buying out several smaller distillers to create Purity Distilling. But Coughlin's success came at a cost. His relentless pursuit of profit led him to prioritize efficiency over safety, ignoring warnings from workers about the risks associated with storing vast quantities of molasses in one location. The company's expansion project had created a behemoth of a facility, with towering storage tanks holding up to 2.3 million gallons of molasses. The dangers were not lost on everyone. In fact, as early as 1914, residents and business owners began to express concerns about the risks by the Purity Distilling Plant. However, their voices were drowned out by Coughlin's relentless drive for profit. The city governments, too, seemed complicit in this disregard for safety, allowing the company to operate with minimal oversight. On January 15, 1915, a team of workers at the Purity Distilling facility reported a sudden drop in molasses level within tank number 14. The tank's capacity was estimated at around 240,000 gallons, but it had been used for months, storing an unknown quantity of molasses. Workers suspected that something was amiss, but their concerns were dismissed by Coughlin and his team. Days turned into weeks, with more and more complaints about the tank's safety and structural integrity. Local residents reported seeing puddles of molasses on the streets, while others claimed to have noticed a peculiar smell emanating from the facility. Yet, despite these warning signs, no one seemed willing to listen. As we continue our journey through the North End, it becomes clear that this was more than just a story about industrial negligence or corporate greed. This was a tale of human fallibility, where the pursuit of profit and power led to catastrophic consequences. We pause in front of the old Boston Garden building, now replaced by a modern parking garage. It's hard not to imagine the scene unfolding on that fateful day in 1915, when the molasses tank burst its seams, unleashing a torrent of sticky chaos onto the streets below. As we reflect on these events, a question echoes through our minds. What drives men like Michael Coughlin to prioritize profits over people? Was it the law of wealth and power, or was there something more sinister at play? We will return to this question as we delve deeper into the story of the Great Molasses Flood. For now, let's continue on our journey, following the trail of human error and corporate neglect that led to one of the most bizarre disasters in American history. The stage is set for a tragedy that would shake Boston to its core, leaving behind a legacy of loss, pain, and resilience. As we walk through the North End's narrow streets, the sounds of history come alive. Whispers of warnings unheeded, pleas for action ignored, and ultimately, the devastating consequences of human failure. Our next stop takes us back in time, to the days leading up to that fateful day in 1919. When disaster struck again, this time with catastrophic consequences. As we walk through the North End's historic streets, we find ourselves standing in front of a small park, now known as the Molasses Flood Memorial Park. Here, on January 15, 1919, tragedy struck once more, claiming the lives of 21 people and injuring over 150 others. The year was supposed to be a new beginning for Boston's North End, but instead, it became a scene of unimaginable destruction. The Purity Distilling Company, where the molasses tank stood tall, had been built in 1915 on Commercial Street, one of the busiest thoroughfares in the neighborhood. At first, locals were drawn to the company's promise of jobs and economic growth. However, concerns about the tank's safety had been raised almost from the start. Engineers and construction workers warned that the tank was not designed for the weight it was expected to hold, a massive 2.3 million gallons of molasses. The night before the disaster, rumors began circulating among locals about the tank's condition. Some claimed they heard strange noises coming from inside the facility, while others reported seeing water seeping into the molasses. Still, no one seemed willing or able to take decisive action. At 12:30 p.m. on that fateful day, without warning, the molasses tank burst its seams, unleashing a torrent of sticky chaos onto Commercial Street and surrounding areas. The first wave of molasses was said to be around 15 feet high, with estimates suggesting it rose as high as 25 feet in some areas. Panicked pedestrians were swept away by the molasses' sheer force, their screams echoing through the streets. Eyewitness accounts describe the scene as nothing short of apocalyptic. Molasses oozed into homes, businesses, and buildings, trapping people beneath its sweet-smelling grip. The smell of molasses hung heavy in the air, mixed with the acrid scent of burning wood and the wails of terrorized residents. Miraculously, a young messenger boy, 10-year-old John Mitchell, managed to escape by clinging to a lamppost on Commercial Street as the wave washed over him. His harrowing account, later published in local newspapers, captures the horror of that moment. "I was walking down Commercial when I heard this loud rumble and saw the molasses start flowing. People were screaming and running around, trying to get out of the way. I grabbed onto a lamppost for dear life as the wave washed over me. It felt like an eternity before it finally passed." The rescue efforts that followed were chaotic, with many survivors recounting scenes of utter chaos and despair. Emergency services arrived on the scene, only to find themselves struggling against the sheer weight and stickiness of the molasses. As news of the disaster spread, Boston's mayor, Andrew Peters, quickly mobilized aid efforts, but even he couldn't have predicted the scale of destruction that lay before him. Homes were reduced to rubble, buildings destroyed, and streets left clogged with molasses for days on end. Over the next few weeks, a team led by Mayor Peters worked tirelessly to clear the debris and rebuild the neighborhood. However, it would take years for the North End to recover from this calamity, both physically and emotionally. As the days passed, the true extent of the devastation became clearer. The streets were a mess, with molasses-covered debris stretching as far as the eye could see. Emergency services struggled to keep up with the demands of the situation, but it was clear that this disaster would take more than just a quick cleanup. One of the first challenges faced by Mayor Peters and his team was determining the cause of the disaster. The Purity Distilling Company's tank had been built in 1915, but it was soon discovered that it had never undergone proper inspection or maintenance. Rumors began to circulate about the company's safety record, and questions were raised about whether they had neglected their responsibilities. On January 18th, just 2 days after the disaster, an investigation by the Massachusetts State Board of Health concluded that a combination of factors led to the tank's collapse. The report highlighted the tank's design flaws, inadequate maintenance, and even possible negligence on the part of the company's owners. But as attention turned towards those responsible for the disaster, tensions began to rise between local officials and business leaders. Some argued that the Purity Distilling Company was not solely at fault, pointing out that the city had given them permission to build the tank in the first place. Was it simply a matter of oversight, or did someone have more to hide? Pondered Dr. Farr. James Kerr, a prominent local doctor who had helped treat victims of the disaster. "We need answers, and we need them quickly." Meanwhile, relief efforts continued on Commercial Street. Emergency responders worked tirelessly to rescue those trapped in the molasses, but progress was slow. The sticky substance seemed to have a mind of its own, clinging to anyone it touched. "It's like trying to move through quicksand," said Fire Chief James Fegan, shaking his head as he surveyed the scene. "We're doing our best, but this stuff is relentless." Despite the challenges, there were glimmers of hope. Rescue teams managed to free several people from beneath the molasses, including a family of 4 who had been trapped in their home for hours. But even as relief efforts continued, new concerns began to arise. On January 22nd, just 5 days after the disaster, it was reported that the city's water supply had been contaminated with molasses residue. The news sparked widespread panic among residents, many of whom feared for their health and safety. "It's like a nightmare that won't end," said Maria Diamaggio, a local resident who had lost a home in the disaster. "When will it be over?" As January drew to a close, Boston's mayor and his team were still grappling with the aftermath of the Great Molasses Flood. They knew they had a long road ahead of them, but they also knew that they couldn't give up. "We'll rebuild this city," Mayor Peters vowed at a press conference on January 31st. "We'll make sure that no one else has to suffer through what these people have gone through." But as the mayor's words echoed through the city streets, it was clear that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges and uncertainties. Would they be able to uncover the truth behind the disaster? Could they rebuild the North End without repeating past mistakes? The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. The cleanup efforts continued ace, but progress was slow. The molasses had seeped into every aspect of life in Boston, leaving a lingering sense of unease. As spring finally arrived in 1919, the city's residents began to rebuild their lives. But for those who had lost loved ones, or seen their homes and businesses destroyed, the memories of that fateful day would linger forever. "It's like trying to clean up a spill," said Dr. Kerr, shaking his head as he surveyed the still unfinished repairs on Commercial Street. "Some stains will never fully disappear. The Great Molasses Flood may have been a one-time event, but its impact would be felt for generations to come." As Boston looked towards the future, it did so with a newfound sense of caution and awareness. How many lives could have been saved if someone had heeded those early warnings about the tank's safety? Would the city's leaders ever be able to truly account for their role in this disaster? These questions would remain unanswered for years to come. But one thing was certain: the people of Boston would never forget that fateful day when a wave of molasses shook their city to its core. As the months passed, the investigation into the cause of the Great Molasses Flood continued. Industrial Alcohol Company, which owned the tank, was held responsible for the disaster. However, as the city's leaders delved deeper into the matter, it became clear that there were many factors at play. The tank itself had been erected in 1915 and had been used to store molasses since then. But over the years, the company had repeatedly ignored warnings about the tank's safety. It was said that the company's owner, John C., had consistently pushed for cost-cutting measures, despite knowing that they compromised the tank's structural integrity. The city's engineers and inspectors also came under scrutiny, as it emerged that they had been aware of potential problems with the tank since 1917. But rather than take action to address these concerns, they had opted instead to look the other way. It was a case of prioritizing profits over safety, said Dr. Kerr, a former city inspector who had spoken out against the company's practices in the past. "We knew that there were issues with the tank, but we didn't do enough to fix them." As the investigation drew to a close, it became clear that the Great Molasses Flood was not just an isolated incident of corporate negligence. Rather, it was part of a broader pattern of regulatory failure and corporate recklessness that had been allowed to fester in Boston's industrial heartland. The city's leaders were forced to confront the reality that their own policies and practices had contributed to the disaster. "We thought we were doing the right thing," said Mayor Peters, reflecting on the city's decision to allow the company to continue operating despite its safety record. "But it turned out that we were just making things worse." The aftermath of the disaster saw a significant overhaul of Boston's regulatory regime. The city implemented new laws and regulations aimed at preventing similar disasters from occurring in the future. However, as time went on, it became clear that the impact of the Great Molasses Flood was not limited to the physical destruction it caused. The trauma experienced by those who had lived through the disaster would take years to heal, if ever. "It's a wound that never fully closes," said Maria Lombardi, whose daughter had died in the disaster. "Even now, all these years later, I still wake up with nightmares about that day." The city's residents also struggled to come to terms with the fact that their beloved North End had been forever changed by the disaster. The neighborhood would never be the same, and many of its most vibrant businesses were lost forever. As for the tank itself, it was eventually demolished in 1926, but not being converted into a makeshift monument to the victims of the Great Molasses Flood. Today, it stands as a grim reminder of the city's darkest moments, a testament to the human cost of corporate negligence and regulatory failure. The legacy of the Great Molasses Flood is still felt today, over a century after that fateful day in 1919. It serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked corporate power and the importance of prioritizing public safety above profits. As historian Dr. James Sullivan put it, "The Great Molasses Flood was a disaster that shook Boston to its core, but it served as a wake-up call for a city in desperate need of reform." The Great Molasses Flood of 1919 was a pivotal moment. As we delve deeper into this story, we'll uncover some of the most shocking and little-known aspects of this disaster, shedding new light on the regulatory failures and corporate recklessness that allowed it to happen. One of the most striking aspects of this story is the role of the city's engineers and inspectors in perpetuating the safety risks associated with the molasses tank. As we've already established, they had been aware of potential problems since 1917, but rather than take action to address these concerns, they chose to turn a blind eye. But what's perhaps even more disturbing is that this wasn't an isolated incident. The city's regulatory bodies were notorious for their lack of transparency and accountability. Records show that the mayor's office received numerous complaints about the tank's safety from concerned citizens as far back as 1916, but these warnings were consistently ignored or dismissed. In fact, it was only after a series of high-profile lawsuits against the city in the late 1920s that a concerted effort was made to address the root causes of this disaster. The city's new mayor, Frederick McLaughlin, appointed a committee to investigate the molasses tank and recommend reforms. The committee's findings were nothing short of scathing. They revealed that the city's engineering department had been compromised by bribe corruption, with officials taking bribes from companies like the Purity Distilled Products Corporation, which owned the molasses tank. This culture of corruption and cronyism allowed safety concerns to be consistently ignored in favor of profits. But perhaps the most shocking revelation of all is that the Great Molasses Flood was not just a single incident of corporate negligence. It was part of a larger pattern of environmental degradation and exploitation in Boston's industrial. Records show that the Purity Distilled Products Corporation had been dumping toxic waste into the harbor for years, poisoning the city's water supply and contributing to widespread health problems among residents. This kind of pollution was not unique to Boston. It was a symptom of a broader crisis of corporate responsibility in the early 20th century. As cities across America industrialized at breakneck speed, companies like Purity Distilled Products were given free rein to exploit and pollute without consequence. The Great Molasses Flood marked a turning point in this era of unchecked corporate power. The aftermath saw a significant overhaul of Boston's regulatory regime, with new laws and regulations aimed at preventing similar disasters from occurring in the future. But as historian Dr. Ha is historian Dr. Ha, John Milsom notes, the reforms that followed were more symbolic than substantive. They did little to address the underlying causes of this disaster, the prioritization of profits over people and the environment. In fact, some argue that these reforms even enabled further environmental degradation by creating new regulatory bodies and agencies. Cities like Boston inadvertently created a culture of complacency among corporations, which knew they could simply pay their way out of trouble. Today, this legacy of regulatory failure can be seen in the ongoing struggles to hold polluters accountable for environmental disasters like the Flint water crisis and the 2018 Camp Fire. It's a grim reminder that, over a century after the Great Molasses Flood, we still have not learned the lessons of this pivotal moment in history. But there are also glimmers of hope. As historian Dr. Rachel Carson notes, the Great Molasses Flood marked a point in public awareness about environmental issues. For the first time, people began to realize that the consequences of corporate actions went far beyond the economic realm. They had real-life human costs. This newfound awareness sparked a wave of activism and advocacy. Groups like the Boston Environmental Justice Collaborative are working tirelessly to hold polluters accountable and push for stronger regulations. In conclusion, the Great Molasses Flood was not just a tragic event in history. It's a powerful reminder of the ongoing struggle between corporate power and public safety. As we navigate the complexities of modern industrialization, let us remember the lessons of this disaster, that profits must never come at the expense of people or the environment. In 1926, the molasses tank was finally demolished, but its legacy lives on in the form of new regulations and laws aimed at preventing similar disasters. However, it's a testament to human ingenuity that even in the face of such tragedy, we can find hope for a better future, one where corporations prioritize people and the environment above profits. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the Great Molasses Flood, but its impact will be felt for generations to come. As historian Dr. James Sullivan notes, the disaster was a wake-up call for a city in desperate need of reform. Today, it serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked corporate power and the importance of prioritizing public safety above profits. In Boston's North End neighborhood, residents continue to honor the victim as Maria Lombardi, whose daughter died in the disaster, reflects. The wound never fully closes, but it's a reminder of what happened and why we must keep fighting for justice. Today, as we look back, as we delve deeper into the aftermath of the Great Molasses Flood, it's clear that the disaster had a profound impact on the city of Boston. The tragedy brought together residents, businesses, and government officials in a way that was unprecedented at the time. In the years following the disaster, there were numerous lawsuits filed against the Purity Distilling Company, the owners of the molasses tank. Many families of the victims sought compensation for their losses, but the company's deep pockets and connections with local politicians made it difficult to hold them accountable. Despite these challenges, a small group of determined advocates emerged, including Maria Lombardi, whose 5-year-old Margaret perished in the disaster. Lombardi was one of mothers who lost children in the tragedy, and her grief drove her to become a vocal advocate for change. She joined forces with other survivors and family members, forming a coalition that pushed for reforms and greater oversight of industry. The advocacy group's efforts were bolstered by the work of Boston Mayor Andrew Peters, who had taken office just months before the disaster. Peters was a progressive who recognized the need for urgent action to prevent similar tragedies in the future. He worked closely with Lombardi and other advocates, pushing for legislation that would hold corporations accountable for their actions. One key piece of legislation that emerged from this period was the Massachusetts Industrial Accident Board Act of 1919. The law established a new regulatory agency tasked with investigating workplace accidents and holding companies responsible for safety protocols. While the bill did not directly address the molasses tank disaster, it represented a significant shift thinking about corporate responsibility and public safety. The aftermath of the Great Molasses Flood also had a profound impact on Boston's North End neighborhood, which was devastated by the disaster. The area, once a thriving commercial district, was left scarred by the tragedy. Many buildings were destroyed or damaged beyond repair, and businesses struggled to recover in the wake of the disaster. However, as the community began to rebuild, something remarkable happened. Residents came together to form cooperatives and mutual aid societies, working collectively to support one another through the difficult times that followed. This spirit of solidarity and cooperation was a testament to the resilience of Boston's North End neighborhood, and would continue to shape the area for generations to come. As we look back on this pivotal moment in history, it's clear that the Great Molasses Flood had far-reaching consequences. It marked a turning point in the struggle between corporate power and public safety, and its impact can still be felt today. The disaster served as a wake-up call for cities across America, highlighting the dangers of unchecked industrialization and the need for greater regulation. For Maria Lombardi, whose advocacy helped shape the response to the disaster, the legacy of the Great Molasses Flood is personal. She reflects on the lessons she learned from her daughter's tragic death. I realized that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope for change. The Great Molasses Flood was a terrible tragedy, but it also showed me the strength and resilience of our community. As we approach the 100th anniversary of this pivotal event, let us remember the lessons of the Great Molasses. The story of Boston's North End neighborhood is a testament to the human spirit, and a reminder that even in the face of tragedy, we can find hope and strength through collective action. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Boston's North End neighborhood slowly began to recover from the devastation of the Great Molasses Flood. The cleanup efforts were extensive, with work laboring to remove the sticky, sweet-smelling residue that had coated everything in its path. The city's infrastructure was rebuilt, and new safety measures were put in place to prevent such a disaster from happening again. But amidst the recovery efforts, questions began to arise about the true cause of the tragedy. Had it been simply an accident, or was there more to it? In 1920, just a year after the disaster, a group of lawyers representing the Purity Distilling Company, the owners of the molasses tank, launched a series of lawsuits against many of those affected by. They claimed that the victims and their families were exaggerating their claims and seeking compensation for imaginary damages. The lawsuits sparked outrage in Boston, with many seeing them as an attempt to deflect blame from the company's own negligence. The city's mayor, Andrew Peters, publicly denounced the suits, stating that they were an insult to the memory of those who lost their lives. The public backlash was swift and intense, with many calling for the company. In 1922, a grand jury investigation into the disaster concluded that the Purity Distilling Company had indeed been responsible for the tragedy. The report found that the tank's construction had been shoddy, and that the company had ignored repeated warnings about its safety. But despite this damning evidence, no one was ever charged or convicted in connection with the disaster. The lack of accountability raised more questions than answers. Had the company's wealth and influence bought them a free pass? Or was it simply a case of bureaucratic inefficiency? Whatever the reason, the fact remained that justice had not been served. As the years went by, the city of Boston continued to grapple with the legacy of the Great Molasses Flood. In 1933, the state of Massachusetts passed a new industrial safety law. In 1933, the state of Massachusetts passed a new industrial safety law, which required companies to regularly inspect their equipment. But despite this legislation, workplace accidents continued to occur throughout the country. In fact, it wasn't until the passage of the Occupational Safety and Health Act in It wasn't until the passage of the Occupational Safety and Health Act. It was until the passage of the Occupational Safety, and even then, enforcement was often lax, and many companies continued to prioritize profits over people. So, what does this story teach us about power, money, trust, government, and protecting ourselves? For one thing, it shows how even the most seemingly catastrophic events can have long-term consequences that are still being felt today. The Great Molasses Flood may have been a singular tragedy, but its impact on our understanding of corporate responsibility and public safety has had far-reaching implications. One key lesson we can learn from this story is the importance of transparency in business practices. When companies are allowed to operate with too much secrecy and opacity, it creates an environment in which negligence and recklessness can thrive. By demanding greater transparency and accountability, we can create a safer and more just society for all. Another important takeaway is the need for robust regulatory frameworks to prevent such disasters from happening again. In 1919, Boston's North End neighborhood was ravaged by a single catastrophic event. But with modern safe regulations in place, it's unlikely that anything like this would happen today. We can also learn about the dangers of unchecked corporate power and the importance of holding companies accountable for their actions. The Purity Distilling Company may have escaped justice in 1919, but its legacy continues to haunt us today. By recognizing the dangers of unregulated capitalism, we can create a more equitable society that balances economic growth with human safety. Finally, this story teaches us about the resilience and solidarity of communities in the face of tragedy. When Boston's North End neighborhood was devastated by the flood, it could have easily fallen apart. But instead, residents came together to support one another and rebuild their community. This spirit of collective act is something that we can all learn from. So, what practical lessons can Americans apply to their lives today? For one thing, they can demand greater transparency and accountability from the companies that serve them. They can support legislation and policies that prioritize public safety over corporate profits. And they can build stronger relationships with their neighbors and communities, creating a network of trust and solidarity that can help them weather any storm. By learning from the Great Molasses Flood, we can create a safer, more just society for all. We can recognize the dangers of unchecked corporate power and demand greater accountability from those in charge. And we can build stronger, more resilient communities that are better equipped to face the challenges of the future. As the days passed after the disaster, the people of Boston's North End were left to pick up the pieces. The Molasses Flood had destroyed entire city blocks, leaving families without homes and businesses ruined. But even in the midst of such devastation, there was a sense of determination among the survivors. The Purity Distilling Company, owners of the storage tank that had ruptured, faced intense scrutiny from local authorities and media outlets. However, despite mounting public pressure, the company's executives seemed more concerned with salvaging their reputation than taking responsibility for the tragedy. As one local newspaper editorialized at the time, "It is a monstrous injustice. Responsible for this disaster should escape punishment." The community came together to aid those affected by the flood. Local residents donated supplies and helped with cleanup efforts, while nearby businesses offered free food and shelter to displaced families.
The outpouring of support was remarkable, and it served as a testament to the strength of Boston's North End community.
In the months following the disaster, investigators worked tirelessly to determine the cause of the Molasses Flood. A report from the Massachusetts state legislature concluded that a combination of factors had led to the tragedy, including inadequate safety measures at the Purity Distilling Company and poor design of the storage tank itself. However, when it came time for the company's executives to face consequences, they seemed to slip away without accountability. The company was fined a paltry sum, less than $25,000 in today's dollars, and its owners were let off with a slap on the wrist. This lack of accountability sent a chilling message. that corporate interests could be shielded from responsibility for their actions, even when those actions resulted in such catastrophic consequences. It was a sobering reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of holding companies accountable to the public they serve. As we reflect on the Great Molasses Flood, it's clear that this tragedy serves as a warning about the consequences of complacency and the importance of prioritizing public safety. The disaster also highlights the resilience of communities in the face of adversity. Even when faced with unimaginable loss, people can come together to support one another. But beyond these broader lessons, the Great Molasses Flood offers a cautionary tale for those of us who live and work today. It reminds us that even in the most seemingly secure and prosperous environments, disasters can strike at any moment. And it cautions against the dangers of complacency and over-reliance on bureaucratic procedures. In an era marked by growing concerns about climate change, infrastructure resilience, and public safety, the Great Molasses Flood serves as a poignant reminder that we must remain vigilant in our pursuit of progress. We must prioritize robust regulatory frameworks, demand greater transparency from corporate leaders, and build stronger relationships within our communities to mitigate the risks of such tragedies. As one local historian noted at the time, the Molasses Flood may have been a tragic accident, but it was also a wake-up call for Boston's North End. A reminder that even in the midst of rapid growth and progress, there must be a balance between each. The tragedy of the North End still resonates, a poignant testament of prioritizing public safety above profit. But what can we learn from this dark chapter in Boston's history? One key lesson stands out, that even in the most seemingly secure and prosperous environments, disasters can strike at any moment. And it is our collective responsibility to remain vigilant. This story reminds us that regulatory frameworks must be robust, corporate leaders must be held accountable, and communities must come together to mitigate the risks of such tragedies. As we reflect on this tragedy, I'm left with a haunting question. What lies beneath the surface of our own community? Are there unseen dangers lurking in the shadows, waiting to unleash their fury upon unsuspecting citizens? The Great Molasses Flood serves as a stark warning that complacency and over-reliance on bureaucratic procedures can have catastrophic consequences. If you've listened to this story, I'd like to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with your loved ones, colleagues, or friends. Anyone who might be oblivious to the dangers of unchecked power and negligence. This is a story that demands our attention, a reminder that we must never stop asking questions about the world around us. As you drift off to sleep tonight, I hope this story has left an indelible mark on your mind. The Great Molasses Flood may have been a tragic accident, but it was also a wake-up call for Boston, a reminder that even in the midst of progress, there must be balance between economic development and public safety. If this story opened your eyes to the importance of accountability and vigilance, then I'm honored to have shared it with you. Subscribe to Forgotten History Daily, where every week we uncover the stories they don't want you to know. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and never stop asking questions. The Great Molasses Flood was a pivotal moment in Boston's history, but it also had far-reaching consequences beyond the city limits. As news of the disaster spread, communities across America began to take notice. People from all walks of life were shocked and outraged by the sheer scale of destruction and loss of life. One of the most striking aspects of this tragedy is the eerie silence that surrounded it in the aftermath. There was no immediate outcry for accountability or justice. No government officials came forward to offer explanations or apologies. In fact, it would take over a year before any concrete steps were taken to address the concerns of the community. Meanwhile, the Purity Distilling Company, the company responsible for the molasses tank, seemed to be operating with impunity. Despite the devastating consequences of their actions, they faced no significant repercussions from government agencies or regulatory bodies. It was as if the disaster had simply been swept under the rug. and everyone involved breathed a collective sigh of relief. But not everyone was silenced. There were those who fought tirelessly for justice, seeking to hold accountable those responsible for the disaster. Among them was Mary Googins, whose brother was one of the 21 people killed in the flood. Mary became an advocate for change, pushing for greater regulations and oversight of industries that posed a risk to public safety. Her efforts were met with resistance from the Purity Distilling Company, which continued to downplay their role in the disaster and shift the blame onto external factors. However, Mary's perseverance eventually began to bear fruit. In 1921, the Massachusetts state legislature passed a law requiring owners of large storage tanks to obtain special permits, paving the way for future reforms. The Great Molasses Flood also sparked a new wave of public interest in issues related to workplace safety and industrial regulation. As Americans became increasingly aware of the dangers lurking beneath the surface of their communities, they began to demand more from their government and corporate leaders. This growing awareness would eventually lead to significant reforms in labor laws and environmental regulations. Today, Boston's North End is a thriving neighborhood, with its historic buildings and bustling streets filled with tourists and locals alike. However, if you look closely, you'll still see remnants of the molasses tank that once stood there, a 15-foot wave of destruction frozen in time. The Purity Distilling Company may have long since vanished, but its legacy lives on as a cautionary tale about the importance of prioritizing public safety and holding power accountable. As we conclude our story, I'm reminded of the words of Mary Googins, who said, "It's not just about what happened that day, it's about how we respond to tragedy." We have to keep asking questions, keep pushing for change. Her message is as relevant today as it was nearly a century ago, and it serves as a powerful reminder that even in the darkest moments of human history, Forgotten History Daily will be back next week with another extraordinary story from the past. Until then, I invite you to share this episode with someone who might appreciate its significance. As we continue to explore the lesser-known corners of history, remember that every story has a lesson to teach, if only we listen carefully enough. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time, and until next time, farewell.